Good evening, everybody. This is Rick Morgan and Barry from comicpresser.com. And tonight we are going to talk about what is your return on investment if you send your book in for pressing and cleaning, either at CGC or another service. Good evening, Barry.
Hey, Rick. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Doing great. Thanks. Yeah. Barry has a lot of really interesting information he wants to show tonight. So it's going to be mostly information he's come up with, because I don't generally send books into CGC. I'm going to defer to his expertise and knowledge. And not only that, he has a lot of data to share with us as well, and some interesting books as well. Is that right, Barry?
Some data and some books and some points of view, and always interested in your point of view and anyone else's who wants to talk with us. I mean, the world kind of changed May 2nd, 2023.
What happened May 2nd, 2023, other than the day after my birthday?
And happy birthday to you and many more. CGC changed its pricing policies and structures forever until they change it again.
Yeah. And
this was right after CBCS changed their pricing and policies for maybe the third time in a year. And so add this to all the other wonderful macroeconomic trends we have in 2023, from many things, inflation, bank collapses, and war in Eastern Europe, and other looming issues, a slowdown in the comics market compared to what it was during the pandemic, and a bunch of other things. And yes, it's just a very different world where the cost of getting a book graded and the amount of negotiation or research it takes to get a book graded is higher than it's ever been, because essentially every book worth more than $1,000, now you need to negotiate with CGC. A negotiation is you say something and they either agree or they make it higher. That would be a negotiation. But ultimately, every book worth $1,000 requires a conversation and some pricing research ahead of time to get the right fees paid for grading.
I actually sent in a book. It's rare that I do, but I sent in a book for a friend of mine who's in Canada, because shipping is really expensive for him. And I sent in an X-Men 4 and sent it to CGC, I guess just before, because I sent it in like April 30th. And they just charged me. I sent it in and I had gone through the system. It was received on April 30th. And they just sent me notice that they charged me $129 more. It said activity on your credit card. It said we charged you $129 more because we don't agree with the value of your book. So I said, oh, I didn't know you could do that. So it just happened today, literally.
It's unilateral. I'm sorry. Well, my apologies for your loss. And my condolences on your loss. But yeah. I will say that, and what value would you use? The raw book, which is what you're handing CGC, or the graded book, which is what it becomes when they're done with it?
It's a good point. I actually used their tool to get they had an online tool that said, what is your estimated grade and what is the book? And I clicked and it came up with their value. So their own value, they said, was too low when I sent it in.
Fascinating. Actually, I was not aware of that. CGC has a value tool, a tool that delivers comic book values on their website.
I don't know what it happened was I had entered the title of the book and it looked it up and it said your estimated grade, and then they put a charge in my cart for me after that. So I haven't
seen that.
I don't know if it would have changed if I had changed that or not. But that's what happened. Yeah. And someone, a commenter says, Ben, declared value should be for insurance purposes. So he thought, so maybe that's what happened. Maybe they charged me for insurance. I don't know.
Well, no, I doubt that. But yeah, it is FMV is what they call it, fair market value. And the declared value is supposed to be the fair market value, the cost of replacing the book, though an insurance company would love to pay you the cost basis of replacing the book. What did you pay to get it? Whereas, but the truth is, I think what you're declaring is the value to get another one if one is lost, which wouldn't be what you paid for it. It would be what it would cost to get one that next day, if you will. But yeah, insurance values are often lower than fair market values in declarations. People declare it lower because they want to pay CGC a lower fee. That gamesmanship is now harder and more expensive to attempt. It's just ultimately they'll just hit you with a bill and hold your book till you pay. So you pretty much don't have a lot of options, as I understand it.
Yeah, that's been my experience too. That also, I mean, sometimes they've been incredibly good if I call them and ask them questions, and the right person answers a lot of questions and does a great job. But the wrong person is incredibly not helpful to me at all. It just depends on who I get a hold of. We have a question or a comment. What are your recommendations for a book with waves after press? I think we're going to get into that in a moment about recommendations.
Maybe, yeah. Tonight's a bit about numbers though, and decision making, maybe not so much about how-tos on the technique, but we'll see.
Someone says right now it's trying to trade under 400 value due to grading costs. Yeah, grading costs is hurting. Want to talk a little bit about the prices, Barry?
Well, actually, I think the moderns haven't changed so much. They've gone up just a tiny bit, but the cost of shipping and pressing and other things have gone up. And so, yeah, there's a lot to do to get a book ready. The point is for most moderns, most people expect a 9.8 if it's a brand new book. And I mean, some books need that. I just have an example here, right? I mean, here's a book, right, that needs no introduction for the moment, right?
People are crazy for that thing, right?
This is a book just of the minute. Yeah. But I mean, right, these are books where people, expect a 9.8. You have to have one. Now, that's different than a book that was published February of 1975, which is also considered a modern, and it was much tougher to get in a 9.8. But both that book and this book at CGC are in the exact same tier, if you will. At CBCS, they are not. CBCS, there's a new book tier, which is different than the modern book tier. Moderns actually cost a smidge more. This is a new book. Costs a little bit less. Now, there's advantages to other types of services that CGC provides, like pre-screens and things like that. I see a question about that. But, I mean, ultimately, it takes more research now to know what your book is worth ahead of time. It takes more research and preparation to get that 9.8. You kind of have to expect it. You have to inspect it more. You may have to invest in that pre-screen. And then ultimately, you've got to do more with it to guarantee that 9.8. Otherwise you're losing money. That's at the modern. Then you get to their new break point at $1,000. At $1,001, the world changes. You have a $150 minimum fee to have your book pressed at $1,001 book, or to have your book graded. So at 4%. The cost, the $150 minimum for a $1,000 above $1,000 book, that minimum is the same as if you press the book as if the book was graded at $3,750 of value and charged 4%. So the $150 minimum is the same as 4% of $3,750. So my point is that you are paying that price, and at 3%, which was last week's rate, previously. It's even more. It's like $4,000 or $5,000. So CGC is getting for a $1,000 book what they ultimately would have gotten, if you will, for a much more valuable book before.
Well,
they still have a
30% increase. 3% to 4% is 30% more.
Yes, it is on that FMV. Plus, their minimums are higher. So you're really not even going to get to a 4% value until you get over a book that's near $4,000. Otherwise, it's just $150 to them, and that's 4% to grade it and 4% to press it, or $150 minimum to grade it and $150 minimum to press it. So it takes $300 to have a pressed and clean book that's worth $1,001 all the way up to $3,750. It's always going to cost you $300 for that press and grade at CGC. Now, you could do your own pressing. I'm on Rick's channel because Rick is the king of enabling DIY pressing. There are others who do it, but Rick's devoted his side hustle, hobby, passions, budding career, I guess, to enabling other people to clean and press their books.
Yeah, my goal is to help you reach your goals. That's what I like to do. That's what I like to say, right?
Okay. Rick's helped me achieve my goals because I'm a professional now. Before I was just a casual guy. And, I was able to get many learnings from his techniques and advances from his tools. It's the way I do things. And he's helping us in some cases achieve, scale. We can get a lot of a tool or a lot of attention about a technique or a tool from Rick. So, ultimately, we're really excited about what people like Rick bring to the table to do it yourself. But that enabled us now to go pro. Now, as a pro, do I want you to do it yourself? Well, it depends. Depends on what your expectations are. It depends on what timeline you need to be on, and it depends on what your budget is, what type of return you need. So what I thought I'd do is just I have some tables of data. They're ugly. It's messy. It's a bunch of numbers in a grid, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on it. But I wanted to show, what is the real all-in cost of grading, of cleaning and pressing and grading a book yourself, or with an outside presser like us, though there are many others and many less expensive in many cases, or using CGC in the new format. And, this table here, I just want to explain its anatomy. Rick, can you roll your cursor over? I just want to direct your cursor for a minute. So
can you see that?
I cannot see your cursor move. Do you think you have a highlight or something that can point on the screen?
Can you see it now?
At the moment, I don't see anything moving, but I certainly. Oh, yep, I just saw it. It's hard to see. It's almost invisible, Rick. It's like white.
Got it.
I see it though. So I'm just going to direct your attention, the upper left-hand corner of this table. There you go, Rick. Can you just go to where it says $400 modern?
Yep.
There we go. Okay, so there's three tables I'm showing. This is one. And this is includes the cost of buying a $400 comic, cleaning and pressing and grading the $400 comic, and then selling the $400 comic with a net return back to you, with an assumption that you bought the comic for $40 and that it costs you $20% or $80 to sell it. And so these are just figures in the dark, just a way to start. So and then there's colors in this chart. The gray color is something you would do, you, the comic book owner. The blue color is what the outside cleaner presser does, if there is one. And orange is what CGC does. And actually, I probably should have put orange in the right-hand column too, left-hand most column too, because they have a role even in the one you do. So slight color error there. I'll fix it next time. But in general, actually, Rick, that got smaller. So if you go back to where you were, it was easier to see a minute ago.
There we go.
No, it can still be zoomed in. You don't need to see my logo at the bottom, but okay, it's fitting to the screen. That's all right. Let's keep talking for a minute.
Okay.
So column. So what are the expenses? So row by row. This assumes you buy a book for $40 that's worth $400. If you do it yourself, you don't have to ship it to a presser. The dry clean, if there's really no deep cleaning, there could be like whitening and lightning, foxing removal that you do, pressing, paying a fair market value fee to press the book. You don't have to deal with any of that. Your time is worth money. That's not here. All the supplies you have to buy from Rick or whoever, they cost something. That's not here. The cost of the press is in here. The electricity is in here, etc. So it's all valued at zero. So this underestimates your cost. But in general, there's no out-of-pocket for one comic book at $400. Then you still have to ship it to CGC. And you still have to get them to grade it. It's $25 to grade a modern now. I think it might be a couple bucks more. I think that's what it is. And there's no fair market value fee at a $400 book. So you don't have to pay that. You still have to pay to get shipping and handling to get the book back to you. I may have overestimated a tad, but let's assume that's junk fees rolled in. And then you sell the book on eBay or whatever, Heritage, who knows. And it's an $80 fee, 20% is out for you. And conservatively, you'd net $200 on that book. In the next column, the middle column, assume you used a presser like us, like Comic Presser, though there are many other pressers who are less expensive too. So you could do even better. But generally, going through these same expenses, you would not net $200 on the book. You would net $165 on the book, making $35 less on that book if you did it yourself, in my calculation here. And then the right-hand column is CGC's pricing, as I understand it, right? They don't do deep cleaning. You can't get whitening, lightening, boxing removal, tanning removal, stain removal. It's not available at CGC. It's just not there. They'll do dry cleaning at their discretion. Otherwise, you pay a very inexpensive $15 press fee. And then, which is very competitive, and kudos to them, I think, on that lower end book. Then I actually have a shipping charge here to the grader. I guess you don't have to ship it to the grader. So that's actually $20 more in the pocket, a benefit to CGC. Then they charge you $25 to grade it and some money to go back. You still sell it for $80. $80, you're going to get $20 more than if you used an outside presser on the modern book, potentially, maybe even $30 or $40. And so ultimately, silver gold. Oh, right. I see that comment. Rick, if you'll move the comment for a minute, just because it's covering the numbers I'm talking about, that would be great. Okay. So, and we'll get back to that comment. Thank you. But ultimately, CGC pressing and cleaning your modern book under $400, you might be able to do better than shipping that book to an outside presser. You could always do better if you had all the skills yourself, but your time is valuable. And it's difficult to maintain scale and quality, all the time. The situation, though, is that this has a lot of cost built in for shipping back and forth of one book. It's very inefficient. But if you had a bigger batch, all of a sudden the presser and the CGC would start to look very close in cost. And some pressers, again, will be less expensive than CGC. They might still be, but over time, they'll have to bring their prices up a bit, because if you're too good and you're too cheap, you drown. You get too much work, and then ultimately your reputation suffers because you can't turn it quickly and people complain, and your customer respect and customer loyalty is the key in pressing. Trust, reputation is as important as your actual throughput. So this is kind of a scenario for mine. So Rick, can you just show a video, show a Malibu Sun, or can you show? Sure. So what kind of books can you do this with, right? I have a very thin book as an example, and I have a thick book as an example. Now, these books may not be worth $400. They actually may be worth more. All of a sudden, all this wonderful ROI could disappear. But I just gave some examples, right? So I see on Rick's machine that these videos are a little grainy. So if you look at them, they're probably not as smooth as one might see on our Instagram feed or on your laptop or your display. But ultimately, these types of books, where you really do need to get a good return, to on the pressing, maybe CGC is the right people for that. We get a lot of books that people complain about CGC for, but I don't know. I'm not really a CGC customer pressing for many reasons, right? So, but these are the kind of books where you've got to get that high grade. Okay, and this is a newer book, but not the newest. I showed a Spider Boy. Let's show the MSH 20. Here's in like a 1975, 76 book, I think, maybe 74, but right around that time. And these types of books can also these types of books can also be worth $400 or so, and they're just different, right? So here's another one, where you're trying to get the best grade possible of that flattest book, and maybe it's better if CGC does it, because a lot of the defects on these types of books are pressing type defects, not cleaning necessarily, where you see stains. I'm getting dizzy, Rick. So, maybe your computer isn't like going to do the streaming and the video at the same time. But ultimately those types of books, they have pressing issues a lot, and that's where CGC is the strongest. Getting the pressing part out. All right. So, okay, Rick. So why don't we go to $1,001 book? So basically, after $1,000 book, which as the market continues to go up, even though it's not as high as it was, many, many more books will qualify for that $1,001 plus tier. Now it becomes a lot tougher to get a decent net from your book. So here I assume your $1,000 book costs $200 to buy, 20% acquisition cost. And then you still have to ship it to a presser, but a presser could deep clean this book. A presser can clean it, deep clean it, can remove stains, really clean it up, whereas CGC really can't do that. And I'm kind of looking down the lanes. I don't know if you can see me on the screen, but I'm kind of moving my hand up and down, right? I'm looking down the DIY column. Then I'm kind of looking down the presser and CGC column. And then I'm kind of looking down the CGC only column. When I look down the DIY column, right, on that $1,001 book that I paid $200 for, I might be able to still pay CGC their minimum fee of $150 to grade it, press it myself, and walk away with $370 after $200 of sales expenses, 20% to sell it. So it cost me 20 to buy it, 20 to sell it. 60% is what I used to buy the rest of the services, and I kept the balance. With the presser and CGC, I might only be able to get $167 left, not the $370 on my own. So again, if I can do it myself all the way through, I'll always do better. But at CGC, they can't clean it. They can only press it, and then they would charge higher fees to press. They would charge a higher fee to press it, but they wouldn't have any additional services. So you might still be a little less. You might walk away with $230 in this hypothetical transaction. So you'd still make a little bit more money than hiring an outside presser, but you have to get that $1,001 value. You have to get it. You're guessing at it. You're paying CGC for that guess in that value. And of course, this could be $1,020, $1,050. But ultimately, the moment it's over $1,000, you're paying those minimums. And if you're wrong, or worse, the book is damaged while in handling or during pressing, that's where you can't afford to lose on a book like that. With the presser, oftentimes you're in better communication with them, you're talking with them, you know them, or you've worked with them before, they consult with you. You have more chances of not losing on a transaction like this, where you must win to make a couple $100. But still, CGC could be a better deal here with their pricing based on the way other people do it. Now, CGC will dry clean your book. They won't wet clean your book. They won't deep clean your book. They won't remove stains on your book. They won't try to lighten the tanning on your book. They won't try to get the mold off your book. They won't try to kill it or anything like that. They will literally erase, wipe, scrape. I'm not speaking for them, and all their stuff trade secret. So nobody knows, just to be clear, nobody knows what they're doing by design. But ultimately, they will dry clean, they say. It's at their discretion, and it doesn't cost anything extra. So at CGC, that means there's not a lot of it. But they will do it, they say. So that's there. But I can't speak to it because I'm not a customer. I only see it from the outside. But ultimately, you could still do a little better with CGC. Now, I have some videos of some mid-tier books. Rick, can you put up ASM 19 and just see if it works?
I sure can.
Okay. Just to inspire and, break it up here with numbers, what kind of books are we talking about, right? Here's a book that might be $1,000 book. Not too expensive. So, these types of books have potential in better grade, not necessarily, real high grade is different tier. Lower grade, it's not even worth $400. But ultimately, if you can get it in those nicer tiers, that's kind of where you start moving into a place where it's important. But lots of cleaning is needed here. These books need to be cleaned. Clean to get up to those higher grades, not just pressed. And so, cleaning is a hand skill as much as it is, pressing is automation, pressing is machining. And so it's very easy to sell it and to scale it because it's mechanical. The cleaning is craftsmanship. It's artisan activity. It's a lot harder to sell it, deliver it, and scale it. So CGC, I'm sure, has a room full of dry cleaners. I'm sure they do.
This book is incredibly clean. It very, to my eye, having seen this book dozens or hundreds of times, this book looks cleaned. Do you think CGC remarks on that at all? I know that people are going to ask that question.
Nifty clean. I've not seen that comment on the label, but I'm optimistic. I think the grade reflects the cleanliness.
There is one of the purple labels. It's like A-1 or A-B. Someone will remind me. It says cover cleaned is one of the ones.
That would be a disaster from where we come from.
Right.
So most people, if they see cover cleaned, it's with a purple label and it's restored. Yeah. Most people would panic at that. Okay. By the way, CGC could care less. I'm not speaking for them, but they're the world's best restorers and cleaners. The market is the one that tells us it's bad. CGC, it's a matter of fact. It is either there or not. You can either do it or not. If you want to do it, it can be done. If you want it undone, it can be undone. That's the CGC point of view, as I understand it. Okay. So one more clean book. We want to put up Cap 111.
Sure. Let's see. And I might stop this when it presents the front so we can talk about it a little bit.
That's right. It's actually a double cover, this book. So
wow.
you can't enjoy. You can see it on our Instagram feed at @comic_presser. But yeah, this is a double cover book. And so anyway, yeah, but this, again, cleanliness really matters. As this book was heavily tanned, we lightened it a bit. Most of what we do is with light. I mean, light's as dry as it gets. I mean, as far as I'm concerned,
yeah.
light, it doesn't get any drier, and nothing is added to the book, and light's everywhere all the time. So it's not like you can do anything about it.
Yeah, that's a beautiful book, and being a double cover as well is something special.
Yeah, it's cool, right? So
yeah,
so ultimately, the level of cleanliness you need requires that extra touch. So with the pressing, you might spend a tiny little bit more, but that cleanliness factor is super important. And it's just that's where the rubber hits the road. I think it's the cleaning, not the pressing, because ultimately machining is something we can all get. You can get a $200 t-shirt press on Amazon. Many of you on this video, participating in the stream might have such a thing, or but the fact is that you're going to get the way you press it, is part of what you do. Oftentimes it's the number of times you press it. The best pressing books have to be pressed over and over and over to get the best results in many cases. Maybe 3 times is enough. 1 time is off, most of the time not enough, in my experience. On a modern book, it might be, but once you get to those $1,000 books, more than 1 press is usually needed. Even if you just do something and then you fix something and you just do it again to get completely machined surface. But many times 3 times is probably as much as you need to. Did we clean the inside cover? Yes. I mean, I have before and after photos. Rick doesn't have them. They're on our Instagram feed. They're mind-blowing. Please go take a look. Every tan surface, every inside cover, all of it was lightened. You'll love it. Let's go to the $10,000 example, which is my final mind-numbing table for discussion. Same rows, same columns, same coloration. Here we assume it costs you 50% of the book. So you paid 5 to get 10. Some of you, bless you, never had to do that. You bought the book for 10 cents, and now it's worth $10,000 because you were careful and curious. God bless you. I hope to meet you in person one day, but or meet your books. But assuming it costs you 50%, Rick, you've lost it. Okay, if you'll hold for a second.
Sorry, I keep touching it.
Okay, you had a minute. Okay,
that's not. It's not better, is it?
Okay, let me know when you're done. I'll speak to it, but I don't.
Okay, sorry. I'm trying to make it bigger. I'm getting a comment.
This is good. Leave it right there if you don't.
Got it.
Can you leave it there?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, good. All right, perfect. So this just assumes $5,000 is the in cost, another 20% on the out cost. Here, when you get down to it, you could still make more money doing it yourself, but you have a lot more risk now if you mess it up. Between us and CGC, it's a few hundred. I mean, literally the difference, if you go to that very lower right corner number, you see it's $58. The only difference between an outside presser and CGC is ultimately shipping costs. And that's because we've accrued it all to 1 book. If you would ship 10 books, our numbers would be better. And so, ultimately what you're going to find, but the deep cleaning and the multiple rounds of pressing and the consulting and, that type of, service level is something you're not getting with this price raise at CGC. They are very capable, communicative people, but not for an individual customer on an individual book for an individual order. That's not how they're set up. The people are wonderful, but the policies prevent a lot of that interaction. With companies that are devoted to pressing and cleaning, we exist for that interaction. We're there to make that happen, to be reachable. So ultimately, what I'm trying to show is that the net, whatever you net out on these books, they're going to be, the more valuable the book, the more the more a presser and CGC or CGC are going to do for you in the current environment. Some you'll even do better with the outside presser because they'll be cheaper. Some people are trying to do moderns for $8, $10 a book. But ultimately, that's a lot of, for me, I don't want that pressure. I don't want to try to sell you a $10 book, not get you a 9.8, and then I have 3 hours of back and forth communications to deal with the issue. That's just not good business, right? So ultimately, we take a little bit more time. It costs us $7 more. It costs you $7 more. But I mean, we use that effort, to try to get higher results, typically by pressing books more than once and cleaning them with a finer eye. And ultimately, that's hard to get or guarantee at a CGC, even though they're wonderful, capable, well-staffed people. Now, what's interesting about CGC is on a turnaround, that's a $10,000 book, they are currently promising a 5-day turnaround time. Whereas just a year and a half ago, they were at a 1-year turnaround time. So I'm sure there's been innovation at CGC, but that's hard to fathom. It's possible a lot of people have flown the coop, and that's why they can do 5 days in advertising. When you deal with an outside presser, we're always at a few weeks. We're always busy. We're not too busy for you, and definitely not too busy for your books, but everything has to be managed. The way we do it is you can have a 1-week turnaround. You just pay a little more for that. Otherwise, you go in a standard 8-week turnaround, and it does well. Deep cleaning and things like that, hard to rush. CGC requires a natural looking book. You can't just make it white and not be careful on all the surfaces. You're going to get a cover clean notation with restore grade. And I do see a question here. We'll get to the questions. I know you can put them up. Don't block the thing. But can you undo a cover clean? Depends on the cleaning. What gives it away? I'm not telling, but I'm happy to talk to you about it, and we can. We'll get to that. So I got one more slide. So we're done with numbers for just a minute, and I welcome the comments. We'll try to address them, and we can come back to these numbers. But here's my pros and cons, and I'm biased. First of all, I'm not talking about the pros and cons of doing it yourself. Rick can, because he enables you to do it yourself with Amazon and other books and tools by other people in the community. For using a presser, an outside presser for CGC, as opposed to their embedded pressing operation, ultimately, you're more likely to get a high value or a higher grade increase from folks like us, because this is all we do. That's our focus. Drying, deep cleaning is really a critical add, and it's very difficult. It's not possible to get it from CGC, who is capable, competent, brilliant people. I'm not going to disparage them for a second, but their policies make it difficult to get to the nth degree with your book in some cases. Once you start doing bigger batches, a dozen books, let's start with a dozen. A dozen books fit in the same box as one. A dozen books will fit in a Gemini mailer. A dozen books will fit in a priority box inside of another box. So once you do a dozen books and not one, though you probably won't have a dozen $10,000 books, but the shipping pain lessens as the book value increases. But for your $400 to $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 books, you really can, lower some of the differences, in pressing outside versus inside when you use a bigger batch. We're easy to reach. CGC is one thing. They have great customer service. CBCS is a whole nother animal. To my knowledge, there's one person. Now, it didn't used to be zero. They had 0 people. They didn't even publish their phone number on their website until about 4 or 5 months ago, to my knowledge. We got tons of calls from people just saying, can you reach CBCS for me? Because I can't find that. I can't. Their phone at Google, they couldn't get the phone number. They would Google it, and folks like us Google would serve our number instead. We're consultative. A lot of people, they don't know they're not ordering pressing and cleaning. They're not ordering deep cleaning. They don't know what they need. They're like, some people are very new to pressing and cleaning comic books altogether. They're like, they've just been alerted. This is what you need to do to get the best value in a book. And they're finally getting out of a collection or whatever. They're not flipping and speculating like other people who do it for a living or part of their living, but still, so they don't know. So we're, consulting with people who tell you, let's try this, or let's try that, or this dry cleaning will work. You don't need to go any further. The people appreciate that. It's easier to get from the outsider versus CGC Pressing, who doesn't have its own phone number either, by the way. So you typically get more rounds of pressing attempted. That's our assumption. We don't really know how CGC does it. My understanding is they don't even use heat. They might. I don't think they use moisture because you're adding it, though there are many contradictions like conservation. I will go a sidebar, but conservation is supposed to be conservation because it's removable. But to remove conservation, you have to add water. So conservation is totally removable, but to remove conservation by adding water, you're technically restoring it. So why it's still conservation? The contradictions are myriad with CGC. But ultimately, when you come back to pressing, I just assume that more rounds are available from people who are literally care about you, your name, your books, your relationship, not CGC who's following a policy, has mountains of books, and this is one of the next, one of the next, one of the next. Also, pressers often, the independent presser guarantees results, right? We try to tell people this is what you're going to get. We're going to do our best. We're going to remove 100% pressable defects. We offer do-overs. We hope not to have too many. But I mean, if something comes back with a finger bend or something comes back with not a crease, creases are still there. They're just invisible in almost every case. But if something comes back with, a bend or an indent, a bump, something that could have been a fingerprint that's not completely 40 years old and stuck in the ink, we do our best to try to help people get that out again and try again at our expense to press at their expense to regrade it. And then, of course, companies that press, we have sales, we have discounts, whatever. I mean, of all the prices I just showed in the middle lanes of those slides, they're actually 20% less for people who do bulk business with us. So our ROI gets a lot better for people once, we have a relationship. So, I think ultimately, can you at least get results as good as CGC could get? Rick, if you could go to the last picture, and then I'll just talk about other stuff. This is our pressing and grading scorecard. Some of you may have seen it if you're in our feeds, and maybe this one you shrink. That's fine. Ultimately, if we aim for a blue label in 2023 for our own CGC account, at the moment, we get a blue label. Unless there's something on the book that we were not paid to look for, like color touch. That's not our job. We do find it. If we find it, we report it to the client. But I mean, we ultimately, get the results we seek. And so should CGC. They can guarantee it. That's the one thing they can do. And they have a monopoly on things like signature pressing, right? If you have a yellow label book and it needs to be pressed, only CGC can crack that book and press it, as I understand it, and retain the yellow label. So it's like a little micro monopoly. They are the only folks in the world who can press that. And by the way, which is interesting is they pay to have a facilitator to witness the signature, and you pay CGC to host the artist to sign it under witness. And then when it comes to grading, it costs more to grade the book than another book. So a signed book costs $10 more to grade than an unsigned book for a company who's already been paid 2 other ways to get the signature in that category to begin with. So there's some very fascinating structures that CGC has that just, are the nature of a monopoly or duopoly in an industry. But this is kind of the data that I wanted to bring to the table to talk about. And I'm clear. I'm excited. Hopefully I sound excited about what I do. And I want to hear from people. I just get excited from Rick because, the point is every time a time-saving tool shows up or a quality guaranteeing or a quality consistency enhancing tool shows up, or let's call it a scaling tool shows up, you can do more of something. We delight in that because there's still artistry. It's still complicated and unique. We're not, no matter what you do and what I do, my work's going to be different than yours, right? My results will be different than yours because the way I do it is different. But, the beauty is you can still have artistry on something that was A, made by a machine. This is what comics really are. B, they're reproductions of. They're not really works of art. They're just copies. And yet still my copy can still be unique and special. And your copy can too. So whether you do it or we in CGC do it, or you in CGC do it, or we in CGC do it, or CGC does it all, God bless CGC, they're in every part of the equation. But how you make more money, you'll make the most by doing it yourself. You always will. But it takes oodles of mistakes. My second 1,000 books were way better than my first 1,000 books.
Yeah.
And now my 10,000 plus book is looking just a lot better than my first few thousand. And
I'm
if you
sure we have
haven't,
stories here from people too that could tell us that they, over the years, have gotten better. I'm sure those are everybody's stories that they gotten better over time.
well, I see a comment from Collecting Chaos up here, and hi, how you doing? I know this person, and I don't know your name, but I mean, I know you've been around for a while. I've seen some of your videos. You put helpful tips up. I've learned from some of your tips. I know you have an open mind about. You made a comment earlier that you continue to learn. You made a typo. Actually, you said I continue to earn. I thought that was funny. But my point is that, yeah, there's people who've been doing this a long time, much longer than me. I just get excited about it because I think we all know that you feel successful when you make an old, ugly thing look beautiful. It really isn't so, it doesn't take so long that you can't experience that success really in a day sometimes, or a couple of days. And people get personal joy out of what, what happens when you do it. Now I want to stop talking. Rick, if you could answer some questions these people have, or I can talk to it, that's great. But thank you for hearing me out. My goal again is just to help everybody see maybe it's not so bad to use an outsider. Definitely improve your skills, please. CGC's pricing increases are challenging for everybody, but maybe there's a chance to really benefit from them, especially on these lower end books. They do actually seems to be quite the ROI at the $400 and below level. That seems to be a pretty good deal. So those are my thoughts at the moment.
Yeah, I'll answer this question from Ben. He says, cleaning equals taking something away that wasn't there to begin with, e.g. dirt. And he also writes that restoration equals adding something, e.g. glue paper. I will refer you to an article, I believe, from last year's Overstreet price guide. There was an article in the beginning that talks about, their impressions of restoration, and they define it as I like to define it too. Yeah, there you go. There's an article in there, I believe, written by Russ Bright, who's also on the Comic Tom channel. And he says, it may be a different book, but it may be that one. He writes that there's a subtractive restoration and there's additive restoration in the business. And subtractive is the cleaning and removing of things. And the additive restoration is adding things like glue, tape, borrowing things from other books, stuff like that. I don't know if everybody agrees, but that's what he wrote there. We have another comment here. We have, hi, Barry and Rick. I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in while watching you guys, especially for those who've never used your services. Okay. We'll get it in a second here. Let's see.
Oh, no, he made another comment below. I know.
I see there. I'll show him here. And also Jerry Jerbick says hi. Hi, Jerry.
Hi, Jerry.
From my perspective, you hit the nail on the head when you said you save time, especially if this is not your specialty. Time is a big one, really. So many people I know will start doing this and they contact me right away. How do I do this? How do I do that? I said, well, don't buy all the stuff, right? Don't go in all things. Just start with pressing. I always say, just start pressing, learn your stuff, and slowly lead into it, because eventually people will get a big pile of books around them. They'll get overwhelmed because they're doing all these books, and then that's when you start making mistakes, and then you just never hear from them again after a while because I think they've sort of given up. So, yeah, time is a big thing. If this is not a hobby for somebody who doesn't have time, I will say that from my perspective.
And the definition of restoration, because I see some comments going on, I just want to be clear. The definition of restoration is whatever CGC says it is, period. With that aside, that they just wrote a book, right, which trains the graders, trains their future AIs, makes Matt Nelson's job a lot easier, right? Because a lot of the tribal knowledge they've had was really not codified maybe for anybody, and now it is. But ultimately, I want to be clear, right? The way that there's added and subtracted restoration. So it's not, they said it used to be adding anything, but that was when you didn't really know what CGC was actually doing. Now they published a book, you know what they're doing. Just want to be clear, right? I mean, it's still shades of gray at every level. There's 109 enhancements in the CGC book. Okay. 109 different enhancements you can do to a comic book. There's a table in the book that lists each one of those enhancements and what they are, from staples to color, to glue, to adhesive, to bindery, marrying pages, you name it, right? There's 109 of them. Sorry, I'm mistaken. And ultimately, they talk about that. I see some comments going on trimming. Trimming it was commented in the book. That's among the hardest to detect because you're looking for something that's not there, right? And that's really challenging. But all I would say is that restoration, especially with cover clean, it's totally subjective. It is literally cover too clean, or cover suspiciously clean, or cover clean that doesn't feel like, look like, smell like, or sound like another cover. And comics are such a tactile medium. Watching other graders grade stuff, they go by feel. The number one way they know a cover's clean is it doesn't feel natural. Feel. And so if you're not feeling the paper, it's fine. The next thing is listening to it. If you move the paper, and they're not flipping around some fragile 0.5 Fantastic Four 1. So that's not happening. But for many of the books, never great, you can hear the paper, how brittle it sounds. And so you can hear it. And so there's just other senses that are used to evaluate the books that most people in a hurry on their own or using hope as a strategy don't always know. For people who are highly skilled at this, even then, the eye appeal continues to be the number one aim in my observations that people look for. Is what certainly what we aim for. But if it's not, doesn't feel natural and it doesn't sound natural, then it's going to get escalated to some other enhancement detecting guru in the banks at CGC and some color touch expert or some paper golden age expert or somebody who only knows X-Men 1's, inside and out is going to get handed your X-Men 1. And then they're going to get asked a guru question for 30 seconds, right? And that ultimately decides your fate. So I just think that there's just a lot in it. They're the smartest people in comics work at CGC, and they're not. That doesn't make them the smartest people in the world, but they are to be admired. I mean, they're experts at their craft. And so when you get that expertise, so again, reading what they wrote, reading Guides Like Overstreet, but hearing your paper, feeling your paper, as well as seeing your paper. And sometimes smelling your paper, that's ultimately part of what the folks are doing. It's ironic that after they do all that, they lock it in a plastic coffin forever.
And only let
nothing that they experience, you will ever experience.
And I just did a video recently where if you leave a book in the light, in the slab, it can become light damage just sitting there if it's exposed to light. I just did an experiment I took out last week. So yeah, you're reduced to whatever and that number is whatever they say the number is, and you can't feel it, hear it, touch it, smell it, and it can be damaged in the light. So that I have personally seen an Avengers #1 that someone had a display in their shop that because he had a price tag and the sticker in the corner of it where a sticky note was, you could see where that book had faded around in the light, right? Because it's a red cover. Around where that sticky note was, and it clearly wasn't going to be the same grade.
Which
later,
means, of course, that light through a slab alters the book. You are able to alter a book without even removing it from the slab. So ultimately, I just want to be clear: how restorative is light if light is constantly adjusting the comic while you hold it? It's just so slow you can't see it.
That's right.
Right. Same with acidification. The comic is changing its color, changing itself over time, through the inside out. Buck Farmer, where you been, buddy?
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for your question. Valuations tightening. I'm not quite sure what that means, but I mean, ultimately, I think there's more price discovery available than ever before. You used to get pricing on Heritage, eBay, GPA. Now with Go Collect, Cover Price, though some of them are sharing information and more sources selling comics and reporting their data from the Hip Comic to the Hakes to others. I think there's more opportunity than ever to discover what commonly traded comics really go for. And because there's more data, people are being aware of more sales that might be lower or affect an average. And so that can tighten the valuations up for those. For rare books, I still think the world's your oyster. The rarer the book. And that's what grade does, which is so interesting. The moment you get a grade high enough or odd enough, you have the only conserved book. It's not really the same grade, but now all of a sudden you set the price in the conserved category. While you are sort of in a low census area for your class of book, you ultimately have more pricing freedom. Once you're in a commonly traded grade of a commonly traded book in a commonly traded, whatever region or character, whatever, that's it. You're pretty much out of options now. But the big books, there's always options. So Rick, can you just try a video for me here? Just put one more up. Or, first of all, is it trouble to ask? Just tell me now. Is it trouble to ask for a video?
I can do it.
You want to put up my MAD? I mean, here's a rare book in grade, right? This is a MAD #4. I mean, this thing is just flawless. It's still, there's dark tanning on the back and stuff. I mean, it's a tough book to handle. I know with Rick's computer, it's probably hard to, because I see some graininess. But ultimately, I mean, books like this, I mean, hopefully you can see the sheen on this thing. Once you press it and clean it, I mean, it's just so hard to come. I mean, there's Gaines file copies at 9698, and this book's not that because it's still got some tanning on it. But ultimately, I mean, books like this in the 7.8 plus range, they're very thinly traded when you get to golden age high grade books. And this is like a place where you can really play. This is one example of where it's not the same as if you're trying to get a Teen Titans #2, over the finish line, over the $400 threshold or something.
Yeah, that's a beautiful book.
And then again, yeah, it's pretty. And then I'm going to do just one more, right? Fantastic Four #1. So if you put that one,
there we go. There's the big boy.
Yeah, that's a book again where lots and lots of clean. I mean, that book sells. That I don't think valuations are tight here because people want it all the time. But if you can get that book white, if you can get that book crisp and shiny, there's just so many takers. I mean, because I can't tell you how many 0.5s I get that have, and again, they just want the glue scraped off, or it's like it's hanging on by a thread, and we're just trying to get like 500 water stains off of it for a while. I don't know how these things were run under water over the years, but I mean, but if you can get this book's got some defects.
Wow.
If you bottom on the back, it's got.
I can see those pieces missing, but the rest of it looks really good.
Yeah, it presents really well. So again, this is again when you can get these books, bright, you get a lot of value. This is where it's tougher to get from CGC, right? I mean, you can get them to press that Fantastic Four 1, but many of the defects in this book were not related to pressing, right? They were related to cleaning. And, these are the kinds of things where, where again, whether your own cleaning skills or the presser's cleaning skills come into play, those are harder to find at a CGC. All right, let's answer some more questions. Oh, I see a comment from Jerry. He says every book I worked on and received a conserved grade. Jerry, I mean, you do it all the time.
Well, also he lets the whole world know what he's doing, and he's pretty unapologetic about it in his videos, right? So, yeah.
For those who don't know, I mean, if you're on Rick's video, I assume you know Jerry the Jitterbug, but I mean, I learned from his channel. If you don't subscribe, you should just be subscribing to Rick's channel. You should be subscribing to Jerry's channel. Others who do. I think Collecting Chaos has a channel too, if I'm not mistaken. But ultimately, submitting books twice. If you come to a presser, you don't expect that. You don't expect to have to do a do-over, right? It's like a hassle to have to keep mailing stuff back and forth. People put a Fantastic Four 1 in the mail, they get nervous about it. Just so you know, it's just paper. It goes through the mail all the time. I don't get nervous about it. I insure it and I track it. I'll overnight it. I leave it in the mail as little as possible, but otherwise it goes in a box inside of another box like every other comic, and off it goes.
Yeah, I bought an AF-15 one time and it got delivered to the wrong house, and so I was pretty nervous about that one. It was misdelivered. So I was actually on vacation too, so I wasn't able to investigate myself. I had to enlist neighbors to help me, but that was a sweaty one. I'll have a couple more here I want to go through. So Ben, because he's been so kind and asking questions. He says, my dollars go to 10% brand new books, probably not 80% to gold or silver. Any comment, suggestions? Well, Barry had that $400 range one, right, which was a nice. I mean, I don't know about the age of the books, but do you have?
Yeah, actually, so yeah, you could get lucky if it presses up. So why don't you show that? Well, again, it just depends. Golden Age is my favorite. Why don't you show the Cap 5, please?
Yep. Whoops, sorry.
This is Captain America #5. If you can find these books in grade, yeah, I mean that's the best because there's renewing. But I mean, if you see this book it's still got a spine roll on it, hasn't been adjusted in this picture, but it looks brand new. Rick, let it spin one time so people can see the sheen. I mean, that thing is just.
Oh wow!
I mean, it's like brand new. That book.
Look at that back. Wow.
5th appearance of Captain America. There's a little bit of transfer standing down the bottom from some book that was like on top of it over time, but I mean, this is how far you can take it, right? So I mean, if we can take new techniques on old books, there's lots of room to move. Now, that's the biggest risk, though, that CGC will declare this restored, and there's no question it still has to look natural. Super high grade, super glossy, super white, golden age creates concern among some people. But ultimately, this is where the real value opportunity is. Thinly traded, books that have upgrade potential where for years they've been neglected. And that's actually Jerry Jitterbug does that with these, Captain Marvel books and others where he likes these thinly traded segments of the comic hobby. But I mean, this is where you could really, do well. golden age. Now, another way to do is high grade silver age. So you want to put up that Iron Man 1, please?
Yep. It's sorry, I have to re-invite myself to the thing here. Let's see.
You are always invited to my party, Rick.
There we go.
Okay. So I mean, and just let this spin so we can see the sheen.
Wow. Yeah.
If you can get, your silver age, all the way up there, this is where you probably have the most potential, because these books are pumped by the movies. I mean, they're totally in demand. And so an exotic Captain America 5 is still only, even though it's rare and hard, it's going to appeal to a smaller segment of the population. And Iron Man 1, just about everybody who's entering the hobby or been in the hobby would like to have a nice copy of that book. Gene Kalan art, seminal title, popular figure, and in this case, beautiful. I mean, these like this purple book. Purple's our color, right? I mean, it's like that's really opportunity. So I mean, it's harder to find upgradable silver age, but there's lots of people who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s who are getting out of collections, and these books are coming to market. They're not. I don't think they're rare. I think they're rare in high grade. But I haven't checked the census to be certain.
Yeah, that's a beautiful book. I'm going to go through a few more questions because I want to let people out of here soon. But let me
Edward Feliz, I see that question there about just time and cleaning. How much time goes into cleaning an FF1 like that than a bronze book like Giant Size X-Men 1? They're both just as tough, those two books. I just to be honest, I mean, the frame around the cover of X-Men 1, as well as the back cover, the X-Men 1 foxes a lot. FF1 is usually stained and ragged, and the ink smears.
And Giant Size X-Men 1's harder to press because it's a square bound book, and so you have to be more careful with pressing a square bound book. They have those big staples in them too, so it's a little more of a challenge for me anyway. I've only cleaned a couple of Fantastic Four ones in my life, but I've done dozens of Giant Size X-Men 1. I'm tired of looking at them, in fact.
We get a lot. I probably had 10 of them here. But what I would say is with the Giant Size X-Men 1, when you're done pressing that book, the spine needs to be hand ironed in almost every case. The FF1 doesn't require a lot of ironing, but it might but the Giant Size X-Men spine has to be finished off with handwork in our experience to get the crisp squareness of the spine.
It gets those what I call worms in it, little worms that kind of look like folded or bent paper. A lot of times I'll just remove the cover and then replace it on that book.
You remove the cover on a Giant Size. I think I saw a video on that once. I would, just so you know, we would never, ever, ever try to do that, or we would hand it off to you or someone else. And to be clear, almost all the work we do, unless it is absolutely desperate, is with the cover on. So almost all the miracles we perform with whitening, stain removal, whatever, we don't take the cover off just about ever. But I mean, it happens, but usually because of staple repair or repairing a tear or something like that. But I mean, to clean the book, in almost every case, we do it all with the cover.
Yeah, it's risky to remove a cover and replace it.
How you get the Giant Size X-Men cover back on without it being conserved or restored? How would you do that?
Yeah,
you have a way for that.
You have to reglue it, but they can't see the glue, so they don't know.
Right, it's glued. Actually, it's right. It's glued. They expect glue there. That's what you're saying, right?
Exactly.
They expect it.
Yeah, but I have to actually because if you actually remove the cover, you'll notice that the leaves aren't they're not even. Some of them poke out and some of them are not. They're not like squared up in there, and the glue sometimes like balls up around parts of it. So you have to go in there and scrape all that glue off, and then you re-glue the cover. I have a special form that is that shape, and I put the cover in there, and then I just push it down, and then it becomes, it's ridiculously square when I do it that way. So it's a little bit obvious because it's so square flat that it's, you can tell.
We're not taking off GSX1. We're not taking off any square bound covers here. We're shaping it the best we can, but you can use heat to shape the cover, to shape the spine.
Yeah, with a little iron tool. Modern books manufacture sealed plastic bags. I think those ones that come out, I think those like bagged ones from like Walmart and stuff is what I'm thinking of. Obviously needs to be open to grade. Any recommendations? Open first, have CGC, open never. There were some of those first Miles Morales books, I think, of the what's it called?
Ultimate Fallout 4.
Yeah, I think some of those came in a bag. like that were sealed. Somebody had, because I've seen some that have a mark from that bag in them and they're cut out of it and you can see the line where that bag is and they did press that. So I don't know. Anybody have a comment on leaving the bag and send to CGC if they come in one of those like Toys R Us or Walmart bags? I don't know what to do with those, honestly.
If anyone comments, that's great. I can tell you, we prefer you take it out of the bag. If it comes to us, the longer it's in the bag, the more you're pressing that. There's a seam right in the middle that, you get a crease. It's called the poly bag crease. It's right down the middle of the book. So the longer it's in the bag, the more it's pressing the crease. We often get 9.6s from CGC that they pressed where the note on the 9.6 says poly bag crease. So they're hired to remove the crease. They pressed it until time was up. They stopped. They graded the book, and it was what it was. And they benefit if it's not perfect because you'll just resubmit it. So, ultimately, I don't recommend you keep it in the bag. And if you do, like Midnight Suns, Ghostwriter Midnight, there's other books that are like that in these poly bags. We'll just cut it open. We'll throw the bag away. And the stuff that's in it, the collectible trading card, the little certificates, whatever, they're gone. We don't use them, and CGC won't do anything. They'll throw them away too. So to be honest with you, you should cut it out. You should keep everything that you want to keep out of that book and get it away from anything that's indenting it as soon as possible. That's our take.
I have an old Superman one with, everybody has 10 copies of the one with the armband when Superman died. And the poly bag on that has sort of rotted away. It's like split in a couple of places. It's just decayed over the years. One guy has one of poly bags too, both in great condition, a Silver Age bag board. Oh. Someone else asked earlier, he said it was a shame about the Avengers in the slab. Bleaching out in the light, and red is the color that bleaches in the light. Like there's been a lot of studies on that, and it's the one that does it. I do sell a thing that you can put over a book that prevents it, and I have a recent video in the last 2 weeks that demonstrates how it protects that. So I would recommend, if you are going to have a book with a lot of red on it, and it is in a slab and it's on a wall, and you do something to protect it, especially if it's facing natural light at all. I would suggest that.
Purple is also, it's known as a fugitive color. These colors fade quickly anyway. They're very hard to sustain in nature. They're done with pigments, and over time the pigments fade.
Yeah, mauve, right? Like mauve in the 19th century, they developed that color artificially because it was royal. It was royal forever, right? And the mauve, that color was like big money for the Germans back in the 19th century. Okay. What else?
Well, I know we're just at an hour, Rick. What other questions do we want to answer? I've enjoyed, thank you for hosting me and hearing me out. And I see a ton of great comments here. I'm like drinking it in on the side. I don't know if everybody else can see the comments that people are sharing.
They can't. That's why I try to show them so much, because once this goes to YouTube, they can't all see the comments, and so I try to show them. Let's answer one or two more questions and call. I'll go a little bit over, although I try not to. But I know so many people we didn't get to respond to. Anybody else? Any questions anybody has wants answered? By the way, thanks for all the kind words, especially. I appreciate it here on the channel. So now all of a sudden they're quiet. Let's see. Typically,
I see a couple bit of a conversation going on for the bagged books. Is there a grade max you get for a detached cover or centerfold? Actually, the CGC grading guide it's still subjective. There is as I understand it, if everything else is perfect, there's a maximum you could get with that defect, but other defects then further downgrade it. So with the detached cover, I guess that's both detached. I don't know maybe that's a 3, but I think the centerfold can be out at just one staple, and you can still be in possibly even in a 6 range, but definitely in the high 5s.
I think I wrote a note here somewhere. I think it can be good, but not very good. I think very good means complete attached book in one piece. I believe. Don't quote me on that. I wrote a note to myself. And someone asked a question for you, Barry. It says, do you do business with CBCS also, or just CGC now?
No, we do business with CBCS. We love them. I mean, I just want to be clear. CGC allows CBCS to exist. If they didn't allow CBCS to exist, they really would be a monopoly. They need CBCS. And we need them too. They're strict graders over there. They have good eyes. They've been around the business in the longest. I mean, they're committed people. But their signature verification program is unique, and it's needed. If you have a pre-signed book, it's really key. I saw Matt Nelson commenting the other day on, I think, Elite Comics 11 Instagram feed that, they don't certify Steve, that you can't get a SIG series with Steve Ditko in it. You can't get a Steve Ditko signature in any CGC, SIG series, right, because he passed away before they could ever validate. So, but at CBCS, you can get your Steve Ditko signatures validated. That's very, very important.
I got.
So
I just
I
have to
do
show
think
mine.
they're.
I have to show my. I can't not show my Steve Dick
Look at that.
to Rick with the Spider-Man eyes.
This
So
guy.
technically Spider-Man
Rick's got one of everything, maybe 10 of a few other things.
Yeah, I just that's a source of pride. I got this too. It's a source of pride for me. A couple more. Let's just go. One guy says, I'll go through quickly. Does it mean I need to remove my Ghost Riders under poly bags? I would.
Are you going to get them graded?
I would.
Yeah.
The poly bags to me offer almost no protection. In fact, they make creases in the book. So for me, I wouldn't.
They also may have acids in them. I just want to be clear, right? Those books acidify. That poly material is not archival, right? When you put stuff in Mylars and whatever, you're paying extra for polymer that is inert.
It's also at the bottom, little pieces of it in the bottom of every comic book box where people left them in there. They coat the bottom.
These are not inert polymers, right? So the inner well of a CGC slab is well researched, that material. I just want to be clear. Any polymer that's touching your book that's not archival is hurting the book, in my opinion.
So here's from Jim collecting case. Says detached centerfold is 2.5, detached cover 1. Overstreet. Who knows what the relationship is between them? It's in. My son asked me. Nolan asked me a couple months ago. Why do we say mint for mint condition for a comic book and not print condition? Because he says because minting is for pennies and coins, right? They're minted, but comics are printed. He said it should be called print condition. I said, I think we borrowed the coin grading system.
What's interesting, as I understand it, is the best quality coin is proof. It's a proof
there
coin,
we go. So it should be proof.
Right. So I'm not even sure. Yeah, it's like the first coin they made struck with the cleanest die and that kind of thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to answer one last one, and then we'll call it quits. Is there a recommended submission number that is ideal? 5 or 10? I don't know what he means. Like 5 or 10 comics at once at a time, or is that great?
Earlier, I said a dozen books fits in it. Gemini mailers made to hold a dozen sort of common thickness comic books, and it fits, and that fits in a priority box. We think and work by the dozen over here, typically. So for shipping and stuff, you'll get your most efficiencies if you work by the dozen in many cases. Other things, certain bags we use and boxes can hold up to about 20 comics. So units of 20, 2 dozen maybe. So 1 to 2 dozen are really good bricks of books that you can move around pretty easily. Don't take up a lot of space in the mail. Still get regular postage rates.
And I think one of those how many of those slabs fit in one box from CGC? I've had a slab that had 12 in it exactly too.
25, if I'm not mistaken.
25?
That's why invoice fees change.
I see. Okay. All right. Well, I think that's it. Thanks for everybody. We're back down to 19. We had as high as 29 viewers by my count, and hopefully we'll have more in the future. And Barry, I want to thank you for all your expertise. I know a lot of work went into this, and I appreciate all of your efforts.
And not only that, it only went into it just in the past week as the world changed around us all. But anyway, right. I hope we all benefit from this new system in some way, and may your collecting journeys take you to prosperous forks in the road. Thanks, Rick, for having me here.
Right, you're welcome so much. Hey, take care, everybody. Bye-bye. See ya. Thanks for joining us. Take care.